My name is Piper Anderson. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in Ohio. To neighbors and relatives, I was always seen as the perfect child. The oldest daughter, the one my parents could count on any time. They would often brag, saying I was independent, strong, and always planning ahead. But the truth behind those words was painful. What they really meant was that I had to take care of myself, while my younger sister, Emily, was treated like a princess. Since high school, the difference was clear. I worked part-time jobs at a bakery and a restaurant to save money for college. Emily, on the other hand, got everything handed to her. My parents paid for her to attend a fancy private school, while I struggled to make ends meet. I'll never forget the day I finally bought my first car, a used silver gray one. I was so proud because it took me 2 years to save up. But when Emily turned 16, my parents gave her a brand new car as a birthday gift. Everyone clapped and cheered while I forced myself to smile, hiding the hurt inside. Whenever I tried to bring up the unfairness, my mom, Carol, would always say the same thing: "Piper, you're stronger and more independent. Emily needs more help than you." It sounded like a compliment, but it felt like invisible chains holding me down. It trapped me in the role of the one who always sacrificed. Meanwhile, Emily barely had to lift a finger, and everyone praised her as if she had achieved something amazing. I still remember my college graduation. I graduated with honors, and my parents came, but they left early. Why? To help Emily move into her new apartment in New York. I stood alone on the campus lawn with flowers and my diploma, wondering why my achievements were never enough for them to stay with me, even for one full day. When I was 26 and finally got my first promotion, my parents hosted a family dinner for me. But halfway through the meal, the entire conversation turned to Emily's wedding plans. My success was brushed aside like it didn't matter. Still, I kept trying to stay close to the family. I always answered the phone, no matter the time. When Emily and her husband, Mark, had money problems, I paid their rent for 3 months straight. When my nephew Jacob was diagnosed with learning difficulties, I spent weeks researching schools and programs for him. Nobody even asked me, I just did it, because everyone expected me to. My dad, Richard, would often tell people, "Piper is just like me, hardworking and never complaining." I'd smile on the outside, but inside those words hurt. My silence wasn't because I didn't feel pain. It was because I had gotten used to my voice not mattering in this family. Emily, who's 6 years younger than me, was the complete opposite. She had a way of making people forgive her even when she was at fault. She quit her first job after a few months because she didn't like it, and instead of being upset, my parents gave her money to start an online business. When that failed, they comforted her, saying, "You tried your best, and that's what matters." Hearing that was like swallowing glass. I had failed before too, but no one ever comforted me. My whole youth was like this. I worked hard, supported myself, and even supported my family. Emily just had to exist, and she was celebrated. At some point, I realized they didn't really see me as a daughter. They saw me as the pillar that held everything together. By the time I turned 30, after another big step forward in my career, I hoped my parents would finally see me differently. But even at the small party I invited them to, my mom shifted the conversation into planning for Emily's new apartment. I swallowed my pain with a sip of wine. By then, I was used to it. When I was 31, my career reached a huge milestone. I was promoted to project director at a tech company in Columbus, a job I had worked almost 10 years to achieve. My salary doubled, I got stock options, and even my own private office with a view of the city. Sitting in that chair for the first time, looking out at the city lights, I felt proud. Finally, all those years of effort had paid off. I texted my mom the good news. I was just promoted. The company threw me a celebration. Half an hour later, she replied, "That's good, Piper. Oh, by the way, are you free next week? Emily needs someone to watch the kids while she prepares for her art gallery event." I laughed bitterly. I had just reached the biggest achievement of my career, and still, all they cared about was Emily and her children. By 28, Emily was married to Mark, a man my parents adored, always calling him a loving husband and father, even though he jumped from job to job. Emily followed her passion for art and opened a small gallery in Cincinnati. The gallery barely made money, but my parents saw it as brave and creative. They poured more money into helping her rent a new, bigger space. And once again, I was reminded that when I struggled, I had to do it all alone. But for Emily, there was always a safety net. When I invited my family for dinner at my new apartment, I was so excited. I had worked and saved for years to finally afford it. I thought maybe, at last, they would notice what I had achieved. My mom glanced around the place, nodded quickly, and then said, "Emily is also thinking about moving into a bigger apartment. Piper, can you find someone who could help her rent a nice place at a fair price?" I froze. The home I bought with my hard work and sacrifice became nothing more than another way to compare me with Emily. Once again, the story turned back to her. The more I tried to shine, the more invisible I became in their eyes. Emily, meanwhile, always had a soft cushion under her. Even her failures were dressed up with sweet words. When her art show had almost no visitors, my dad hugged her and said, "You have real talent. The world just isn't ready yet." But when I failed a project at work, his only words were, "You need to work harder." To them, Emily deserved protection. I only deserved reminders. The gap between us was even more obvious during the holidays. That Christmas, I bought my parents a beautiful leather chair set they had wanted for a long time. I saved for months to afford it. They smiled when they saw it, but then their attention went straight to Emily's handmade gift, a sunflower painting, still wet with paint. "This is gorgeous, Emily," my mom cried out. "So full of soul, sweetheart." The whole living room was filled with praise for her, while my expensive gift sat in the corner, ignored like it didn't even exist. I remember sitting there, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Not a daughter. Just a servant who gave and gave, but never got noticed. And the worst part? Emily didn't even seem to realize what was happening. She happily talked about her new plans, her dream apartment, her next art show. My parents listened to every word as if she was destined for greatness. One night, during my father's birthday dinner, I finally spoke up. I said softly, "Sometimes I feel forgotten. Everything I achieve never seems to matter as much as what Emily does." My father chuckled, patted my shoulder, and said, "Piper, you're strong. You don't need praise. Your sister is different, she needs encouragement." That careless statement crushed me. My so-called strength had become their excuse to ignore my feelings completely. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat by the window for hours, staring at the glowing city streets below. I wondered how many more years I would have to wait to see pride in my parents' eyes. Or maybe I was meant to live my whole life as nothing more than a shadow standing behind Emily. But deep inside, a fire began to rise. I started to realize I couldn't keep waiting for recognition from people who didn't want to see me. I had come too far to turn back now. I was strong enough to rewrite my own story. By the time I turned 33, I was standing at a crossroads I had never even dared to dream about. After more than a year as project director, I was promoted again, this time to vice president of strategic development at the tech company I had spent nearly 12 years building my career in. This wasn't just a new title. It was my entry into the executive world, with a salary big enough to finally chase a dream I had held on to since college. Years earlier, during a business trip to France, I had fallen in love with the old stone houses scattered across vineyards in the countryside. I had promised myself, one day, I'll have a place like this. A home that no one can dismiss or take away from me. It wasn't only about the house. It was about proving to myself that I was worthy. Then, in September, the opportunity appeared. A 200-year-old stone villa was put up for sale on a hillside outside Aix-en-Provence. It had olive trees, a terrace paved with old stones, and wide windows that opened to a glowing valley filled with sunlight. I didn't hesitate. After years of saving and planning, I signed the contract. When I held the keys in my hand, my heart raced. It felt like I had just reclaimed a missing part of myself. I named it Villa Solace, a place of comfort, a sanctuary to heal all the scars left on me since childhood. Still, I didn't tell my parents right away. I wanted it to be a surprise. I dreamed of revealing it at Thanksgiving, showing them photos of the villa, and finally seeing their eyes light up with real pride for me. I played the scene over and over in my mind like a movie, waiting for that day. While I was moving forward, Emily kept stumbling. Her gallery opened, closed, then reopened somewhere else. Her husband, Mark, kept jumping from one job to another. My parents poured all their energy into helping them, even giving Mark money to start a small coffee shop. I only learned about it when I called my mom one evening, and she casually said, "We just want to help them get back on their feet. You don't need anything, you're already too stable." I said nothing, but inside I broke again. Too stable? I was still their daughter. Didn't being stable deserve celebration too? That October, while preparing for a long business trip, I secretly flew to France to see the villa with my own eyes. It was more beautiful than I imagined. The thick stone walls, the high ceilings, the ancient fireplace, it felt alive with history. As I walked through the rooms, I imagined the day I would sit there with my family. A day when maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me. The villa was filled with laughter during my 3 days there. I explored every corner, snapping photos of the details I loved most. I saved those pictures on my phone, waiting for Thanksgiving so I could reveal them like a special gift. On the flight back to the US, I smiled to myself, convinced this time would be different. This time, I would finally show my parents something they couldn't ignore, a dream I had worked years to reach. But under that hope, a quiet fear stayed with me. My family had never truly valued what I did. What if they only glanced at the photos before turning the conversation back to Emily again? I hated that doubt, but I couldn't get rid of it. Still, I told myself, if they never change, then at least this villa will be proof for me that I can build my own world, free from favoritism and comparison. As Thanksgiving drew closer, my excitement grew. I had made a small presentation, chosen the most beautiful pictures to print, and even created a photo album wrapped as a gift for my parents. I was sure that when they saw it, they couldn't possibly overlook me anymore. Then, one Tuesday morning, less than 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed. My mom's name, Carol, lit up the screen. I smiled faintly, expecting her to ask about holiday dinner or which dish I was bringing. But when I opened the message, it felt like ice water pouring into my chest. "Piper, your father and I talked. This year, we want a peaceful Thanksgiving with just Emily and her family. Maybe you could skip it. We need space. Hope you understand. Love you." I read it again and again. Every word cut deeper. Skip it this year. Did they understand what they were asking? Thanksgiving was our most sacred family tradition. And now, they were shutting me out of it. Shock and heartbreak slammed into me all at once. I set my phone down and stared at my laptop, unable to read a single word on the screen. Memories rushed forward. 17 years old, coming home exhausted from my bakery shift, only to help Mom in the kitchen while Emily painted her nails. 25, barely able to keep my eyes open after work, yet still rushing over to babysit so Emily could go out. Holidays where I brought wine, flowers, and gifts, yet no one noticed. And now, peaceful. That word stuck in my throat. Did my presence mean chaos? I was the one who never made a scene. I was the one cleaning up after everyone else. And space. Space from me. From my very existence. For 34 years, I had been blind to the truth. In my parents' eyes, I had never been essential. That day, I sat through a company meeting like a ghost. People spoke, presented, laughed, but I heard nothing. My chest was hollow. Later, I slumped onto a chair in the hallway, hands trembling. That short message carried more weight than any argument. It confirmed my deepest fear. I was nothing but the support beam. Emily was the centerpiece. In anger, I drafted texts. If I don't matter, then don't expect me to pay Emily's rent anymore. Delete. After everything I've sacrificed, this is how you treat me? Delete. My fingers shook, palms sweating. Then I heard my therapist's voice in my head. Larson had once told me, you can't control how they act. You can only control how you respond. So instead of pouring out all my pain, I typed just one word, enjoy. I pressed send, then leaned my head against the wall. One word that looked small, but carried everything inside me. No blame. No begging. Just the end of years of sacrifices no one had ever seen. That evening, I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights of Columbus glow beneath me. The pain was sharp, but hidden beneath it was something else: relief. Maybe this was what I needed. Maybe this was my chance to stop begging for recognition I was never going to get. I had Villa Solace. I had my career. I had the power to create a life not built on their approval. I refused to bury the hurt; it was real. But I could turn it into something new. I opened my notebook and wrote at the top, "Thanksgiving, Villa Solace." Underneath, I listed names of people who had always truly cared. Aunt Ruth, my mom's sister, who had always been my rock. Uncle Kyle and his wife in Iowa, who never stopped encouraging me. Friends like Haley, a former colleague who always had my back. I pictured a long table inside the stone villa. Laughter filling the rooms. A place where no one sat in the shadows, waiting for a scrap of recognition. That text from my parents tore down my illusions, but it also opened a door. For the first time, I was ready to create my own tradition. And my parents, Carol and Richard, would one day have to live with the consequences of the choice they had made. That night, after sending "Enjoy," I sat in silence on my balcony as the autumn wind moved through my hair. I knew I couldn't let this Thanksgiving become an empty hole in my life. If they had cast me aside, then I would build my own table. My own family. My own tradition, surrounded only by people who truly valued me. The thought warmed my chest. I opened my laptop and scrolled through the photos of Villa Solace. The gray stone walls. The ivy-covered terrace. The olive fields stretching into the horizon. It all seemed to wait for me to bring it alive again. I pictured the kitchen glowing with firelight, the smell of roasted turkey and red wine in the air, laughter echoing across the long dining room. And the first person I called was Aunt Ruth, my mom's younger sister. She was 60 now, a psychology professor in Portland. She always noticed how unfair my family was to me. She often told me, "Don't give up everything for them." When she heard I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving, she stayed quiet for a while, then slowly said, "Piper, this year, let yourself be the center. If you really want to host your own dinner, I'll be there, no matter where it is." Her words gave me a burst of strength. Right away, I made a list of family and friends who had always stood by me. Uncle Kyle and his wife in Iowa. My cousins Dylan and Sophie, who I had spent every summer with at our grandparents' house. A few close friends like Haley and Marcus from work. I didn't want a huge, noisy crowd. I wanted a small group where everyone respected each other. In the next days, I called them one by one. Every call surprised me and touched my heart. Sophie squealed over the phone. "Thanksgiving in France? Piper, you just saved us from another night of listening to Mom and Dad complain. I'm booking my ticket right now." Dylan laughed loudly. "I never thought you'd be this bold. But you're right. If family doesn't want us, we make a new one." Haley, my closest college friend, now a designer in Chicago, thought I was joking at first. But when I sent her photos of the villa, she went silent. Then her voice shook as she said, "Piper, you've hidden yourself for too long. This is the moment everyone sees how bright you really are. I'm coming no matter what." Every yes I received felt like I was finding lost pieces of my life. Villa Solace wasn't just my private dream anymore. It became a stage for a big turning point. I even hired a local manager in AIXN province, Lauren, a man around 50 who knew the whole region. He suggested adding more guest beds, filling the kitchen with local food, black truffles, Bandol wine, cheese from nearby farms. I agreed to everything. I was so excited, I lay awake night after night. But in quiet moments, worry crept in. I knew my parents, Linda and Richard, would notice when everyone disappeared for the holiday. They'd feel betrayed. Maybe they'd call, maybe they'd yell. But that wasn't my burden anymore. I wasn't the daughter waiting in the corner for scraps of their approval. I was writing my own story now. Then one evening, I got a message from Mark, Emily's husband. Just a few words. "Can we talk privately?" Important. My chest tightened. I didn't know what he wanted. Maybe Emily already knew and was pushing him. But part of me was curious. Mark wasn't blind. He had seen the favoritism and often gave me sympathetic looks. I stared at my glowing phone, finger hovering over the call button. Inside me, a storm raged, caution against the need to finally hear the truth. Should I invite Emily's family too, or should Villa Solace be only for people who truly cherished me? I turned off the lights and stood by the window, watching Columbus shine below. In the glass, I saw a different Piper, not trembling from being left out, but standing strong, ready to prove her worth. Still, I knew one wrong choice could pull me back into the old painful cycle. One question filled my mind: would Villa Solace start a new tradition, or become the place where broken ties exploded even worse? I stared at my glowing phone, finger hovering over the call button. Inside me, a storm raged, caution against the need to finally hear the truth. Should I invite Emily's family too, or should Villa Solace be only for people who truly cherished me? I turned off the lights and stood by the window, watching Columbus shine below. In the glass, I saw a different Piper, not trembling from being left out, but standing strong, ready to prove her worth. Still, I knew one wrong choice could pull me back into the old painful cycle. One question filled my mind: would Villa Solace start a new tradition, or become the place where broken ties exploded even worse? That night, I finally called Mark back. His voice was cautious but honest. "Piper, I know you're upset with your parents and maybe with Emily too. But we don't want another Thanksgiving filled with that stress. I heard you're hosting in France. Could our family come? The kids would love to see everyone." I stayed quiet. My head filled with memories of Emily taking the spotlight while I stayed invisible. If I invited them, would that happen again? But then I remembered Aunt Ruth's words: "In a new place, you set the rules. No one can take over unless you let them." I took a deep breath and said, "Fine. But this time it has to be different. Emily needs to understand this is my space, and I won't let anyone turn it into her stage." Mark sighed with relief. "I'll make sure she understands." "Thank you, Piper." Just like that, the guest list grew by 4: Emily, Mark, and their kids Olivia, 10, and Max, 7. When I told Sophie and Dylan, they were surprised but quickly supportive. Sophie laughed. "I trust you'll handle it. Who knows? In a new place, everything might change." Finally, departure day came. JFK Airport was buzzing with energy. I greeted each family group as they arrived. There were hugs, thank yous, and relief that we were escaping the forced family dinners of the past. Then Emily showed up with her kids. My chest tightened until Olivia ran straight to me and hugged me. "Aunt Piper, I can't wait to see your house in France." Max came running behind, excitedly talking about all the things he wanted to do at the house on the hill. I blinked in surprise. Maybe, just maybe, the children would be the bridge that helped us heal. The long flight felt like one big party. Everyone laughed, talking about French food and the beautiful views. Dylan kept making silly jokes, and soon the whole cabin was filled with laughter. I looked at Emily. She sat quietly, only giving small smiles now and then. Not the loud, bragging Emily I was used to seeing. When our group finally arrived at Villa Solace, everything went quiet. The stone walls were covered with ivy, olive trees surrounded the house, and the sunlight shone on the tall windows. The beauty made everyone stop in awe. Aunt Ruth squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. "Piper, you've made something wonderful. This feels like real family." The kids ran around in the garden, giggling. Sophie and Haley took photos everywhere. Dylan opened a bottle of local wine and raised his glass. "Here's to a brand new tradition." That first night, I cooked a simple dinner: roasted chicken with herbs, stewed vegetables, and toasted bread with cheese. We all sat at the long kitchen table. The air was full of laughter and chatter. What touched me most was that no one mentioned my parents. No one compared me to Emily. Instead, every story was about happy memories we shared, and everyone felt equal. Emily was quiet, but when little Olivia showed us a drawing she made of Villa Solace, Emily looked at me and whispered, "Piper, your house, it's beautiful. Thank you for letting us come." Just a short sentence, but I could feel something changing in her. The next morning, we went to the village market. The stalls were full of colorful fruits, cheeses, and wines under the autumn sun. Everyone joined in picking things for Thanksgiving dinner. This time, no one told me to step aside for Emily. I was the host now, and they respected that. Later that day, Max and Dylan set up a little tent in the garden for the kids. Sophie and Haley helped me test a new recipe, turkey stuffed with truffles and chestnuts. The kitchen was alive with laughter and the smell of rich food. When I turned around, I saw Emily standing outside on the terrace, holding a glass of wine, staring at the view. She looked at me and said softly, "Piper, I know you've carried so much. I never really thought about your feelings. But now I see, you deserve all of this." I didn't answer, just met her eyes. In that moment, I knew something had shifted. The weight of favoritism was gone. For the first time, Emily and I stood as equals. Two women, not the chosen one and the forgotten one. That night, lying in the villa's master bedroom with moonlight pouring across the floor, I realized this trip wasn't just about proving my worth. It was about something bigger. But deep down, I also knew the storm wasn't over. My parents would soon notice the whole family was gone. And when they did, the real fight would begin. On the second afternoon at Villa Solace, while everyone was busy setting the long table on the terrace, phones began ringing one after another. First Aunt Ruth's, then Dylan's, then even Sophie's. When I walked out of the kitchen, they were all standing in the living room, faces tense. Aunt Ruth handed me her phone on speaker. My mother's voice came through, sharp and worried. "Ruth, where is everyone? Why isn't Emily answering? We're waiting for dinner and nobody has shown up." The room fell silent. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Mom, it's me." There was a long pause. Then my father's angry voice cut in. "Piper, where are you? Why would you drag the entire family away like this?" I answered calmly. "I'm at Villa Solace, the house I bought in France. And yes, everyone is here with me. I invited them for a new kind of Thanksgiving." On the other end, my mother gasped. "You what? You bought a house in France? And no one knew? Why keep this from us?" I held the phone tighter, my voice steady. "Because you never cared. I wanted to wait and share it later, but then you told me not to come home. So I made my own gathering with people who actually want me here." There was heavy silence. I expected more shouting, but instead my father let out a bitter laugh. "So, this is your revenge? Dragging the whole family across Europe? Piper, you're more selfish than we thought." The word selfish burned inside me. Selfish? I've stepped aside for Emily my whole life. I stayed quiet when I was ignored. I never asked for anything. And now, when I finally want something for myself, you call me selfish? My mother's voice shook. "Piper, we just wanted a peaceful holiday. You know Emily gets tired. She needs more care." I cut her off. "And I don't? Mom, have you ever asked what I need? Or did you just assume I was too strong to need anyone?" The air in the living room grew heavy. Aunt Ruth placed her hand on my shoulder, steadying me. On the phone, my father's voice softened, no longer angry, but full of disappointment. "You've pushed us away. Now the family has chosen your side. Does that make you happy?" I spoke slowly. "I never wanted sides. But you pushed me out first. All I did was take that empty space and turn it into something meaningful." My mother sighed heavily. "You've humiliated us. Now everyone will think we're terrible parents." My eyes narrowed. "If they think that, it's because they've seen the truth for years. I don't need to prove it." The line went quiet. Finally, my father said coldly, "We'll have more to say. But remember this, Piper. You've opened a crack that won't be easy to fix." "Maybe that crack was already there," I replied, then firmly ended the call. The room fell into silence. Some faces looked worried, but most showed agreement. Dylan broke the heavy mood with a half smile. "Come on, dinner's waiting. No way we're letting Mom and Dad ruin this meal." Laughter spread through the group, small but enough to lighten the air. I sat down, my heart still racing. I knew the fight with my parents wasn't finished. They had just realized I was no longer their quiet, obedient shadow. And I knew they would try to pull me back into their old ways. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had a whole family at my side, one I had chosen, and that gave me more strength than I ever had before. That night, I stood on the balcony, the moonlight shining over the olive trees. My father's words echoed in my head, "You've created a crack that won't be easy to mend." I smiled faintly. Maybe he was right. But sometimes, to build a stronger house, you first need to tear down the rotten walls. After that tense call, I barely slept. But when the morning sun came through the big windows, something new stirred inside me. It wasn't fear of being abandoned anymore, it was the calm of someone who had finally spoken a truth she had hidden for years. From that moment on, I knew nothing would ever go back to how it was before. On Thanksgiving Day, Villa Solace was filled with laughter. Aunt Ruth and Sophie arranged flowers on the long table. Dylan helped the kids decorate with bright autumn leaves from the garden. Haley snapped photos with her old camera, catching every moment. No one mentioned Linda or Richard, but the silence wasn't avoidance, it was unity. This was my holiday now, and no one would take it away from me. When dinner began, I stood at the head of the table, looking at every happy face. Candlelight flickered. The smell of turkey and truffles mixed with red wine shining like rubies in the glasses. My voice shook, but stayed strong as I lifted my glass. Thank you all for being here. This year, I thought I'd be eating alone. But because of you, Villa Solace has shown me I am not alone at all. This is the beginning of a new tradition, not out of duty, but out of real love and respect. Glasses clinked, cheers filled the room. I turned to Emily. She nodded slightly, her eyes wet but softer than before, without the jealousy I had always seen in her. After dinner, when we lined up for a family photo on the terrace, Emily pulled me aside into the garden. She stayed quiet for a while, then whispered, "Piper, I owe you an apology. For years, I knew Mom and Dad favored me, and I let it happen because it helped me. But seeing you today, I see how strong you are." I looked at her. "Emily, I never wanted to compete with you. I just wanted to be noticed, to be acknowledged. If our parents can't give that, then at least I need you to understand." She squeezed my hand. "I do now. And I promise, if they try it again, I'll speak up. I won't leave you alone anymore." I smiled, feeling a heavy weight finally lift from my chest. For years, she and I had been on opposite sides of the scale. But today, for the first time, we stood together. Later that night, as everyone gathered around the fireplace, Dylan grinned and said, "Piper, do you realize what you've done? You've created a tradition we all want to keep. Next year, even if you don't invite us, we're coming back." The room filled with laughter, but under the jokes was the truth. Villa Solace wasn't just a house anymore. It had become a symbol of change, a place where I finally stood at the center of a family. In the days after, as everyone left for the US, I hugged each one tightly. Emily held me the longest, whispering, "Let's start over, Piper. For real this time." Back in the quiet villa, I stood again on the balcony, looking at the olive grove and thinking of my parents across the ocean. I didn't know if they would ever admit their mistakes or if they would always see me as too strong to need love. But I knew one thing for sure, I had drawn my boundary and I would never step back again. A year later, as Thanksgiving came closer, I sent invitations to everyone. To my surprise, Linda and Richard said yes. I hesitated, but accepted. When they finally stepped into Villa Solace for the first time, the air was different. No commanding voices, no favoritism in their eyes. My mother simply said, "Piper, you've created something wonderful. We are very proud." I didn't know if they meant it. But for one fleeting moment, the child in me, who had long craved their recognition, felt comforted at last. Villa Solace, once just my private dream, had become the bridge that started piecing a broken family back together. More than that, it proved something deeper. Self-worth is not given by others. It's something we must stand up and claim for ourselves. Piper's story isn't only about favoritism in a family. It's a reminder for all of us. Blood ties don't always mean love or fairness. Like Piper, many people are overlooked or excluded. But the truth is, we all have the right to create new traditions and new homes built on respect and care. The bigger lesson? Our worth doesn't come from grudging recognition. It comes from the way we rise and claim it ourselves. So, what do you think about Piper's journey and her choices? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow this channel for more heartfelt stories and powerful lessons about life and family.